I encourage those who have not read the Code to the Matrix to check it out. There may be some things in there that are a bit outdated since the book was written almost 10 years ago. However, there is in itself a key, there is in there in itself a key that allows you to begin to tumble the words within your mind and begin to decipher what exactly is going on in the reality, because you can't just change language overnight. However, you also see a lot of puns, and I actually came into one yesterday. We were talking about this word miss, like I miss you. And someone said, hey, do you miss me? And I said, hey, I don't really miss anything or miss anyone. And the remark was, why? Because it was seen almost as if that was kind of cruel or callous. And I said, well, I may feel other terms of endearment, but missing, no, because if I'm going to see you again, then you're not gone. Okay, and I'll say that again. If I'm going to see you again, you're not gone. So there's no reason for me to miss you. Because if you think about this word miss, you'll also realize that it means, like if I say, hey, I'm missing my coat, that means my coat is gone. So for us to miss others is kind of misappropriate because they're still here. They may be back, but there's no reason to miss them. However, that's one surface interpretation of etymology within the English linguistic system. But notice how this same word miss is actually referred to from the feminine nature, like Mrs. Doubtfire, right? That's not a female. Mrs. George, Mrs. Scott, Mrs., Mr. and Mrs. Okay, so the word Mrs. is also seeming to be a reference towards the female. And this is, again, that continuous pun that I see throughout the language that is in itself genderized. I was talking about the other day also how the word manual, and there was one more word I had synced that was all about basically things that give you instruction. Guide. Okay, that was the word. So in this word you have guy, which is a man, and you have manual, which is a man, as if to say that only men are capable of being guides. And this, again, is what starts to allow you to see the linguistic programming within the language. And when you're aware of that, it starts to unravel things in your own consciousness that may be set up as things that will hinder you in time because they're just not balanced. So, I trust that rings true to those that are etymological whizzes and they love this kind of stuff, but it never ends. Like I've never stopped ciphering words cipher even in the sleep. And this brings me to a greater level of clarity. So for those that just think that I'm like coming up with some of this stuff, I never really come up with anything. What I do is I actually look at the linguistic system. I see the as above, so below nature within the entire reality. And then I find where those connections are, and then I adapt to those connections. But what I don't do is when I find those connections, turn tail and run from them and insist that they do not exist because maybe I've been taught, or maybe I think, or sometimes even maybe I feel like I know that there's another truth. And this is, what happens at times when we depend on our intuition to actually explain to us everything, but our intuition is miscalibrated. There's a lot of conceit that goes on in the I-ness where even when they say, well, someone says, this is what I feel, this is my gut feeling, and then they feel like, okay, well, that's obviously the truth. But if the gut is disembalanced and filthy and has not been cleaned out in a while, then the gut truth is actually probably going to be distorted within itself. And this is just a sober pill that we all have to take as observers and experimenters with the reality that you will make mistakes. And in fact, the whole art of, in itself, experimentation is to actually make mistakes first and then use the mistakes to calibrate to the perfect balance. So if you also, again, think about the idea of an eye, which is the left side of the brain, or a watcher, as it's often called, you can see that the only thing that you would really consistently be watching all the time would be some type of experiment, something that you're actually conducting where you need to monitor it in order to actually see what the results are going to be. And of course, that has lent itself to a zillion different kind of conspiracies around things watching us and things learning from what we're doing and even running us through drills. But truly, you have the same power as every single thing else in this galaxy with that eye. And so you can either observe others observing you. You can either become the observer and start to realize what's happening in this great expanse. As they always say, there's a level up in the consciousness when the observe shifts to the observer. So this is the keys and the pathway to do that. And this is also spooky free, meaning that it doesn't include a lot of the triggers that go along with when you actually speak certain words. So there are many words that we're using now. And as I said, your ground to how you interpret things actually comes very similar to, like, let's say, for instance, a system. Like, there's a lot of systems right now that the moment that you start typing in the computer, it starts to auto fill or auto try to get an idea of what you're saying. Okay. And the brain works like this, and it will do that with everything. The moment I start even saying the dog needs to go up the tree, your brain automatically, faster than you can think, and your consciousness faster than you think, starts imagining a dog and imagining a tree. And it has to do this, but it only can do that based on the information that you had before. It actually paints a picture of a dog based on what you had before. And so this also means that even when I challenge concepts like words like Satan, words like Lucifer, also being related to Saturn and Venus, those words, though, they set triggers that actually equate for most people to movies that they've watched that people were involved in these kind of things. And then they start to adapt those ideals into the truths of what I'm talking about in relation to those two archetypes. And then it becomes distorted for them. And this is pretty much the whole of reality at times in this entanglement, where it takes you to have strong discernment and adepthood to be able to actually wean through a lot of this BS, literally, and start really seeing the truth. And even just a side note to that, like, I came across, for whatever reason, this guy, I think his name is Christopher Lee. You know, he plays Saddam Numspa, Dracula, and all these different people in these occult movies. And, you know, you could clearly tell that this guy is involved in that stuff, right? But he has these videos that keep popping up on YouTube of how he says that he's basically not involved in that kind of thing. But then he goes and elaborates on different aspects of it. And he was elaborating on the aspect of him playing this Satanistic role that he was sacrificing these different things inside of a church. And he starts to elaborate on what Satanism really is and how it's a concept to turn every single thing that would be good on its head and upside down. So if the cross is right side up, they turn it upside down. If they're going to do the ritual, they try to find a holy place to actually do it in. Then they desecrate the holy place and all this kind of stuff. And the reality was, this is a very short video, but what I actually was able to glean from this being's consciousness is that even the idea of Satanism itself is actually turned upside down. And this is just, again, a sidebar here, but to show you how it all really works, because they're telling you directly, we turn everything upside down, and we call that Satanism. But what if even the word Satanism is actually their first advent of turning things upside down? Because I believe personally that Satan, the original Satan, if you may, or Sat, was the original founder of the original church, and that old son or that old king or that archetypical father actually was the one that was bringing this certain level of spiritual knowledge, whether that was for better or for worse. Clearly, every being has 2 or 3 different poles, but it's just, again, that act of realizing that now these usurpers have come and created all these buildings and done all these rituals, and now they got all these different backwards churches, and they got all these people believing in this dogma of an external God that's not really real. And to me, that's Satanism. From the title, starting at the title, turning that upside down, meaning that's not what the real title really is, and then going from there. So do you see how what supreme knowledge allows you to do is it allows you to not omit anything, meaning that you actually just see things very clearly. You listen to every single word that's being said, and you don't omit anything. However, what supreme wisdom allows you to do is to not stay in the folly because of the contextual agreements that others, including yourself, may have made. And what that means is that if in society they say it really means this and it doesn't, you have to be at a point where you're ready to actually expand beyond where society has been able to reach. And that's why I always said personally in my own memoirs, if 9 billion people are doing something, but I find within the codes and the keys that it's not what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm not doing it. And that's what's carried me so far. That's what has allowed me to go into all these different vistas of not only intelligence, but also application. And even more importantly, that's what has been able to allow me to be here doing this and giving this message despite the incessant YouTube comments and, you know, the stress of the 16 to 17 hour day, the building of the technologies, especially for our children and things that we need in daily life. And sometimes and not getting, especially the resources and the support to do that, and then getting a lot of people playing around. Like I just don't like, especially since this is so serious at times and my time is on the line, the playing around, the fake help, and all the different things where people are just trying to gratify more of their I-ness. When what I want to do is I actually want to train my consciousness to balance itself back out by not only being aware of the collective state of consciousness, but also being aware of how to balance the two, meaning to stop this war that is going on between both sides of the consciousness, i.e. reptile, mammal, light and dark, sun, moon, etc., all of these polarities, and actually stand in between them as a referee. Notice a referee is wearing black and white. The referee is the one that steps in the middle of the two poles, the two sides of the brain wrestling themselves, Cain and Abel, or Jacob down the ladder, the angel wrestling against the flesh, you know, and actually pull them apart and get them to begin to work together. Because if I don't, then I'm going to be locked in this forever in infinite entanglement, which should be, if anything is scary, it would be that. An infinite entanglement of experiencing existence as a separate being only, rather than separate, collective, but a synthesis, merged, which is a realization of when it's a time and a place to use each of those powers for your benefit.